Hey, it's Jeff. Welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be showing you yet again another plant that I saved from root rot, and unfortunately this can happen to anyone despite your level of experience with houseplants. Sometimes it just happens. Root rot not only happens from overwatering, but if you have a certain plant in the wrong type of soil, something that holds on to moisture too long, that can cause root rot. If you have a plant in too large of a pot, the plant is not able to utilize that water fast enough or evaporate fast enough, again causing root rot. So you might not be watering it a lot, but it's just retaining too much moisture. And even underwatering, if you let those roots get too dry and then you give it some water, unfortunately those roots will rot as well, just because they're dried up decaying material. I'm going to show you a couple examples. The first one I'm really excited to show you guys because of how far it's come since having root rot. I purchased an anthurium Regal a few months ago. This was my dream anthurium, and I actually paid a lot of money for this. I found a rather large cutting off of Facebook Marketplace. It had like a large, massive leaf. It was rooting in water, and when I brought it home, I left it in water for a few days, but I did make a video on transitioning it from water to soil. I have since removed that video, not because of like I was embarrassed to show you guys or anything like that, but I don't want to give false information or information that would cause your plant to decline. So what I did in that video is I used the water displacement method. So you have a cutting in water, and to transition a plant to soil slowly without causing it to die, basically what you do is you just keep adding soil in until there is no more water. So it's not like you're just throwing a plant in dry soil, adding some water, and then letting it try to transition. Sometimes it can be really difficult on water roots to transition to soil roots. So that's why I tried the water displacement method. It didn't work. It rotted really fast, and I'm not too sure why, but what I should have done is rooted it in perlite. This is my go-to method for saving houseplants. I'm going to take this cutting out of the pot here in a second just to show you the progression of the roots. So there was a ton of large roots on this cutting when I first brought it home, but yeah, I'll show you what it's been dwindled down to, and then the progress of this plant. I'm going to take this one out of perlite here in a second, but I want to show you my Alocasia silver dragon that I've had for probably about a year. When I first bought this plant, it came in a rather large pot, and I really didn't have much experience with alocasias and anthuriums. So when I brought it home, I gave it some water, I soaked the soil, like what you're supposed to do. And shortly after, the leaves started to get really droopy. It just was not doing well. It was declining. And I kind of sat on it for a day. And then, of course, I decided to take it out of the pot. And it had no roots at all. The stem was rotted. Or sorry, the roots were rotted right off the stem. So I quickly threw it in a pot of perlite. And this is the original plant. And it has since been propagated a number of times. And you can see, look at the roots. It has done so well in perlite. It lives in here for the last year or so. And like I said, I've made a bunch of cuttings off of that, and this being one of them. So I separated, or I divided the plant. This one is currently growing in soil, and I've top dressed it with some sphagnum moss just to hold in some moisture. And I did get 3 little bulbs or corms, which I propagated in soil, and in one of my recent videos I did pot them up together in this container so that it can make, again, a nice full pot. So this is my go-to method for saving houseplants, and the reason why I think perlite is so efficient at saving plants from root rot. The perlite is obviously a really light soil amendment. It's light, fluffy. It just adds or allows a lot of airflow to the roots while still retaining some of that moisture. Like if you pick up a little piece of perlite and you've watered it recently and you squish it, you can feel there's a little bit of moisture like on your hand or on your fingers. It's a medium that holds onto moisture. It allows the roots to utilize that moisture, but it's just such an airy mixture that it allows proper airflow to these roots. Like I still can't get over, I just watered this and I gave it a little bit of fertilizer, but I just can't get over the amount of roots in this perlite. So I'm just going to leave this plant in perlite forever, I guess. There's no reason to take it out, and it's been doing so well. Getting a couple little droopy leaves, but it is now getting some new growth. I also have a number of videos on perlite prop boxes. This is my go-to method for rooting most of my houseplants, any aroid, especially Hoyas. They do super good in the prop box. They root really fast. The only plants I root in water right now are pothos plants like epiprenums. They do really well, and then normally they don't have a tough transition, or at least for me when I pot them up in the soil. Otherwise, most other types of houseplants will be in my perlite prop box. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to take this out of the pot. I'm going to switch camera angles here in a second. But I also did cut the stem up, and I have those rooting in perlite prop boxes. So I took little pieces of the chunk, and I'll show you those as well. Despite the way it looks right now, I'm actually extremely excited for this plant and my cuttings here. So, okay, let's get into it. I actually took this cutting out of the container yesterday. That's how I know there's roots on it, and that's why I'm making this video today. When I saw those roots, I was basically jumping around like a kid in the candy store, and right here, this is a new growth point. I am super excited about this new leaf coming through. So I'm gonna take this out of the perlite again, and that's the nice thing about perlite as well. Like, you're not really disturbing it if you take it out of the pot. So I did leave some of the original roots, and they're black. So I might, like, they're not squishy. I think you know what, I'm gonna take them off. They're not doing anything for the plant. I'm just gonna cut them off. Yeah, they're mushy. Just like that. And look right here. There is a new root. I can't believe it. I was so excited when I saw that yesterday. And the chonk itself is nice and firm. It's not rotting. I'm just looking around. Oh my goodness. That looks, let me get in focus here. That looks like another growth point as well. You can see just a slight little hint of green poking through there. Don't know if that looks like a growing eye. So I was gonna say, well, maybe that's a root. This one, that might be a root. I'm not entirely sure now. That looks like a growing eye. Come on, focus. Getting too close. That looks like a growing eye. This one, I'm not sure if that's a new growth point or a root, to be honest. Definitely a root there. Okay, so this is the progress, and I'm super excited about this little root. Okay. Yeah, everything looks really good. And I'm just going to stick it back in. Whoops. Oh my goodness, I almost broke the root off. I'm going to actually bury this a little bit more. Something like that, and then I'm just dumping the perlite back in. So I'll have to keep an eye on the if that's a root or a new growth point. One of those will be a new growth point for sure. This was actually really hard for me to do because like I said, I spent a lot of money on this plant, about 150 bucks. So when I saw its decline, I was really upset. But now I'm just going to show. I took I just sliced these up, and right here there is a new growth point. It doesn't look like there's any roots yet. Maybe one popping through there. But here is a new growth point. I am super excited. So essentially, from the one plant that I got, I now have potentially four different separate plants. Okay, here's another one. You can see right there, there is a new growth point. I wasn't paying attention, and it looks like I sliced through half of a growing eye, but it's still getting some growth. I don't see any roots on this one. I'm just being very delicate, just in case there are some new roots and growth points. And then on this one here as well, I'm not seeing any roots, but here is, again, it looks like I cut through the growth point. This is all a learning experience for me. I've never cut an anthurium like this before. I've never propagated it by the stem. There's actually even a little bit of moss growing on this one right there. So yeah, this is getting a new growth point right there as well. So I just have like a little sliver of a growing eye, and it's getting some new growth, maybe a little root or something popping through there. But like I said, although these don't look like much right now, I am super excited today for the progress of these plants. So yeah, I'm just gonna seal this back up. These ones are upstairs in my living room. It's just on the floor of my, just below my south-facing window. So it gets maybe a little bit of direct sunlight throughout the day, but nothing strong enough to scorch the leaves. And I'll show you the heat mat here that I'm using as well. Here's my little floor setup underneath my Soltech Aspect grow light. And here is the anthurium. This is the heat mat. I just have it plugged into a timer. So yeah, I got a few cuttings on here. This is an alocasia Regal shield. Don't worry about these. They're looking horrible. These are my philodendron fuzzy petiole propagations. Not doing good, but on the heat mat, hopefully that can generate some roots. And then here's a couple syngoniums. So yeah. I just want to briefly talk about how I water these plants as well. They're a little bit different from the pots to the Perlite prop box. So I'm going to start off with these cuttings here first. And it's no different with my Silver Dragon. I pay attention to the Perlite itself and even the bottom of the pot. Like when it's in ooh, whoops, had some water in there. When I have a separate pot like this, I will take it out of the pot and I'll feel the bottom. If there's any moisture at the bottom, typically I won't water it. And the way I tell if the perlite is dry is, like I mentioned earlier, is you just squish it. If there is no moisture or residue on your fingers, then it is dry. But if you squish it and it's well watered, you should feel some water on your fingers. So if there's water on there, I will not water it. And the same goes for this cutting here as well. I don't let it get completely dry. So if you feel the weight of the pot, it's no different than soil. If you feel the weight of the pot, it's really light, and the perlite is dry, like when you squeeze it, then I'll give it some water and I will soak it. Like I'll put it underneath the faucet and just let it kind of drain out the bottom of the pot. And I didn't yet, but I will always empty the excess water in the bottom if you have it as an insert in another pot. So that's how I water these plants. I'll just keep an eye on the perlite, give it a squish. If it's dry, give it some water. And again, depending on the plant. Alocasias and anthuriums, you don't want the roots to get too dry, so I pay a little bit closer attention to these than some of my other house plants, just making sure that those roots don't get too dry. Now with my perlite prop boxes, I do have a whole video on how to set up and maintain those. I can leave it up in the top corner here if you guys want to go check that out. I probably add water once a year. I rarely ever have to add water in this. The perlite prop box itself, it does not have any holes or perforations on top. I will open this briefly, maybe once a week, just to kind of check on my cuttings, just to see how they're doing, how the roots are progressing, and making sure that there's no rot. It'll get a little bit of airflow, and probably after 5-10 minutes, I'll put it back on, and that's pretty much it. I pay attention to the side of the container. You can see there's a lot of condensation around this container, and I actually did add some water, or I misted. I used my spray bottle and I misted the perlite just for some extra moisture within the container as it was getting dry. When I set up my perlite prop boxes, I'll just talk about this briefly. I add perlite without any cuttings in the container. I will add water so that all the perlite is completely saturated. I will use the lid to drain out any excess water. And when you have your perlite prop boxes, you don't want any sitting water at the bottom. So if there's anything pooling at the bottom, just tilt your container over, have a look at the bottom corner. If there's any water pooling in that, empty it out. You want the perlite to remain moist or wet, but you don't want water sitting in the bottom of your prop boxes. Occasionally, like I said, when you constantly open and close your container, obviously that's losing moisture. You may have to add some water, and I just simply use my spray bottle, my misting spray bottle, and it's actually my larger pump action one, and I just wet it, and then I'll tip the container on its side. If there's any water pooling at the bottom, then I will drain it out. But otherwise, that's pretty much how I take care of these these ones in the pots, and my Perlite prop box. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any comments or questions, please leave it down below. Thanks again for watching my videos, everyone. Take care. Bye.